Welcome, Deven sir, in our small interaction with the banking news and publication. It's from Nepal. Thank you for giving us a time.
Raju, it's an absolute pleasure to be here. Thank you for inviting me. It's a privilege.
Yeah. For asking you questions, can you give me a brief about cross-border payment scenario?
Sure.
It's a trends. It's people's impact and overview of financial inclusion role due to the cross-border payments, the
Sure.
financial inclusion kind of things.
Sure.
In your experience, kind of.
Sure.
Please, can you brief it to me, please?
Absolutely, Raju. Look, it's a fascinating space in the world of cross-border payments. If you think about, there's a lot of fascinating and fantastic work that has taken place in the domestic payments world. I think no matter where in the world you live, I live in Singapore. I've grown up in this part of the world. I've lived in different countries. With the advent of the instant payment or the real-time payment rails has locally transformed domestic economies in some ways, right? It's brought, to your question on financial inclusion, like I've experienced it myself, where you find at the grassroots level people get very comfortable with payments, right, and banking.
Exactly.
And when I use the word banking in a broader context, not just of the traditional banks, but the larger evolved ecosystem, trust gets built.
Okay.
People get comfortable that when a payment is initiated, it is reaching their account. Now, in many cases, it's real time. In some cases, it's near real time.
Yeah.
But in the old world, people needed to see the cash before they were willing to deliver something.
Exactly.
Now, the trust, because of RTP, has come into the banking ecosystem. Now, you take that into the cross-border payments world, right? This has typically been a very large B2B space. And which is
space.
right, and that's the part of the bank that I represent, and we've seen B2B transactions typically and historically being slower, right?
Okay.
They generally take days to process.
Yeah.
They are generally because they involve multiple bank hops, right? The traditional way is it goes through the intermediary bank chain,
Yeah.
right? So there are different parties involved. Costs are not very transparent because of the multiple parties involved. And the transparency that we're used to. I mean, you think about no matter where in the world we live, we order food, we order things, and we always want to know where that item is. The low-ticket item also, we want to know exactly where it is at what point in time.
Yeah.
But when you're moving millions and millions of dollars, we have no idea. We previously used to have no idea.
No idea, right?
Right? So that's the world where we've come from. But look at where we are today and the evolution that we're on. One, this has become a great area of focus.
Okay.
For banks, for fintechs, for regulators, the sovereign intensity in the space has increased a lot, especially when you look at consumer-to-consumer payments,
Okay.
right? You've seen, Raju, you represent Nepal, and we were talking about it that Nepal is very well connected now with the Indian ecosystem.
Yeah.
So from a tourism perspective, it becomes a great play. Similarly, I sit in Singapore, and I know Singapore has done a mix of multiple bilaterals with again countries like India, like Thailand, like Malaysia, where as a consumer you can very easily go into that market and travel and transfer money to individuals and merchants now. But that same ease has not yet come into the B2B space. Especially when I'm talking about it, I'm talking more about what sits between the consumer and the large corporates, which is the SME, MME space and the micro SME space, right?
Exactly.
There is still a fair amount of the traditional friction of cost, speed, and transparency. And what I'll lay over as we talk about it, Raju, from a global lens, right? Is I think there's a interesting fourth dimension into all of this, which is interoperability.
Interoperability, right?
Right?
Exactly.
I talked about the fact that we've got multiple bilaterals that we're seeing.
Seen,
So
right,
you've got Nepal, India, but now let's say Nepal wants to connect with 20 other geographies. It's pretty resource and dollar intensive. Right? There's a cost to doing it. There's a lot of effort involved in doing it. So it'll always become a question of what do you prioritize.
Prioritize, right. Thank you for briefing me the scenario of history kind of
Yeah.
things, that is trend of cross-border payment. Till now, what I believe is that trust. I will share one example with
Please.
you that cross-border payments experience of my.
Yes.
Last year I bought one ticket of GFF for my friends
Okay.
from card from Czech Republic my brother's card from Czech Republic. And
Okay.
they deduct my payment,
Okay.
right? And I didn't receive the ticket as well, and then didn't back my payment as well, right? That is just an example. Last year I questioned them on that in panel as well. It's not a matter of my money, right? I okay with that. It is gone, no problem. But for someone, it is maybe a livelihood kind of things,
Of course,
right?
of course.
For someone, it is a big amount, right? For someone, is they break the trust.
Yes.
The bank, Czech Republic Bank of Czech Republic
Yeah,
Bank
whichever
deduct
bank, yeah, of course.
deduct the payment from my brother's account, but even they didn't receive. GFF team replied me that they didn't. So that how can we build the good trust? I'm pointing you that is that how can we build the good trust on the people? Maybe the trust can be
Yeah.
built in the B2B section.
Yeah.
So you B2B sections, you are a good established company in Singapore or wherever in Australia or UK, and my company will be in Nepal, right?
Yep.
And then the B2B kind of they can easily build a trust, I think. But in the P2P section, person to person sections, is it possible to build a trust on that level, or it's already built it?
Raju, I'll give a B2B context because that's the part of the bank I sit in. But
Exactly.
let's extrapolate and have the conversation. And please feel free to contradict or give your views as well. There is work to be done. I always feel that there is room for improvement in whatever state we're in because the world is evolving. I don't think end states are finite. I think there is room to improve. So take the world of a B2B payment, right? Like I said, the amounts are generally large.
That's right.
The need to know and ensure that the payment you're making is going to the right beneficiary
Exactly.
and having visibility on the movement of those funds effectively is very important.
Yes.
And the other part is we are looking at it at a micro level, one transaction. But think about a slightly different scenario where you could be a hotel, an airline, or any kind of other company where payments are hitting you in the hundreds or thousands an hour.
Exactly.
You need to be able to reconcile as well. So let's bring data also into this because it becomes a very important part of that trust. So first step is ensuring that you know the account that you're paying to belongs to the person that you're saying it goes to.
Exactly.
These are the value accretive services that we're working towards,
Okay.
right? And the world is fragmented, right? Because when you talk about cross-border payments, you're bringing the whole world into the playground. The world is very fragmented, and what I mean by that is there are certain clearing houses that allow certain organizations to be a part of to do the validation services.
Exactly.
There are certain that don't but allow penny tests. There are some where I think Europe is going through a migration of the validation services that they I think going to make a part of what is expected in a payment, right? All of that will help enhance the level of trust that comes in.
Yes.
The second part is data. Now,
Data,
today, if
right.
I make a payment, that payment typically comes with a set of alphanumeric values that go with the payment, but it's scrambled. It doesn't give you relevant information that you can decode and
right.
say that Raju paid Deven
Yeah.
for so-and-so activity. You may have put a reference.
Reference,
Like
yeah.
there may be a lot of stuff that's coming. That enhances the value because now if I'm one of the companies like I talked about that are receiving thousands of payments, I can very specifically reconcile that this is Raju's payment.
Yeah.
Come for this purpose with whatever additional
The things.
data, if I may. All of that, Raju, helps build trust. Now, to your specific example, listen, the amount of transactions that happen in the world, there are sometimes glitches in systems, etc., that may have prevented a transaction. So I'm sorry you underwent what you did, but I'm just trying to give a slightly more broader context. But ultimately, the same thing comes down to the P2P leg as well, right? Where even like we talked about, the 10 rupees, 100 rupees becomes very important, right? Forget the millions. Now, it could be someone's livelihood, etc. So that identity of trust becomes very important.
Okay, thank you. As you said earlier, cross-border payments are helping to grow the SMEs
Yes.
things. How you see these cross-border payments will be groundbreaker, that is the backbone for the growth of
Yeah.
SMEs like countries in Nepal,
Absolutely.
Singapore, Bangladesh, Pakistan kind
Look,
of country.
it's a great question because if you think about like I think about I rewind life a few years back, and I'm like if I was young and I was buying something, I physically had to go somewhere,
Exactly.
right? I needed typically cash in hand, and I had to make a purchase of a good that was sold in the market in physically present where I lived,
Exactly.
right? The access to goods from around the world were not at my fingertip.
Yes, true.
Now, I genuinely I feel I'm blessed living in a country like Singapore where it's a free economy both in terms of goods and services as well as in terms of foreign exchange movement.
Exactly.
And what I mean by that, and I'll take that as an example, Raju, and let's extrapolate from there, right? Like my AirPods case, for example, I think it got shipped from China.
Exactly.
I didn't need to go to China, but there's a marketplace that's available in Singapore which gives me access to merchants from all over.
All over.
I'm a big coffee drinker. I bought a coffee grinder where, again, it got delivered from China and it came to me in like a matter of 3 days.
3 days.
I bought some stuff which came from India. So the point there is because marketplaces are opening up
Exactly.
and the market, did virtually and digitally, it's giving a rise to SME to give them access to sell stuff all over the world.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah.
And hence the cross-border payments become very important because if I can't, clearly I'm not paying someone in China directly, I'm going through a marketplace. But they are the facilitator that are enabling that the money reaches the
Seller.
the seller.
Seller, yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. So now, actually, Raju, I'm going to bring in another concept here where previously if I was buying something from you, I paid you.
Directly.
Right? Remitter, beneficiary.
Yeah.
Now, you've got marketplaces, you've got these payment intermediaries,
Yeah.
and sometimes you've got payment intermediaries of payment intermediaries. So we create what are called nested flows as well,
Exactly.
where ultimately a remitter and a beneficiary are very distant and almost cut out from the transaction that is supporting the trade.
Yeah.
That leads to problems. So I'm going to bring it up because it's a very important one. Nested flows are complex. Regulators have a view on nested flows because how do you AML or screen a transaction where you, Raju, as the Benny, me, Deven, as a remitter, are not even involved in the transaction.
Yeah.
Right? And hence cross-border is complicated. You need to expand how much information you carry in that transaction to show
right.
ultimate remitter, not the marketplace through PI, through a payment intermediary, but ultimate remitter and ultimate Benny
Yeah.
also come into the transaction. Because that transaction becomes, at a finite level, it's someone paying someone, but there's the services are not rendered between those two parties. They're just an intermediary supporting the payment.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
And hence, this world is complicated. Traditional payment schemas don't necessarily carry all of the information of all of the legs, which are important. And especially when it's ultimate remitter and ultimate Benny sometimes don't get carried. And hence, a lot of work has gone in already and will continue to need to get evolved on how commerce is happening.
Exactly.
Very different from me walking up to you with cash and saying, Raju, I'm buying this from your shop.
Yeah.
Now it's happening virtually.
Yeah.
And through multiple intermediaries in the middle. Bank accountable. If they've outsourced the activity to someone, it doesn't get them off the hook to you and me. Right?
Yes.
So similarly, when a bank is bringing someone on board, that diligence becomes very pivotal. Now, whether it's in the realms of security or tech infrastructure, resiliency, these all come into part in the diligence process.
Okay.
Among a host of other things, of course.
And then do you find that all the community, let's say ecosystem, banking, fintech, whoever working on this part, regulator, are giving more serious concern on that part, security part?
Listen, it's very hard for me to speak on behalf of anyone else, but I know what we do internally, and it's a very rigorous process that we do follow. And that's why, like I said, people will comment on the fact that it takes a while for that partnership to form.
Yeah.
But it's justified for the same level of diligence that you're exactly asking on. Because only unfortunately when things go bad, the people start questioning, and that's why that diligence is so important.
So important.
Right?
Thank you.
Solutions are great, don't get me wrong, right? And I think I spoke about it on the panel as well, which is there's a lot of UI, UX or client experience journeys that are being developed, which are outstanding.
For example, I will bit change the questions. That
Sure.
there was a trends of that if I have to remit money from here to before starting of cross-border digital payment, what is it called? TT was there, that kind of LC and then
Yep.
that kind of things was there. But what is the charges you have seen for cross-border payment enabling good enabling of cross-border payments? What is the role of charges, that is fees paying to do the transactions?
So Raju, you asked me why are fees levied for the transactions?
Yeah.
Look, let's make a philosophical comment first. For any service rendered, right, there is cost to certain transactions, and there is a value to certain transactions, right? The cost is not just the movement of the money. There are sometimes, like we talked about at the beginning, right? Traditional cross-border payments have gone through multiple hops.
Yeah.
There are other banks involved as well, right? Let's say you're going from one country to exotic country number 2, there could be multiple intermediary banks involved. They could be taking a part of the fee to move the money, right? However, there is also a lot of checks that go in to ensure that transaction is compliant.
Compliant, right?
Right? Now, in order to keep up with all of this, and I'm going to bring up a third point, which is slightly more true for B2B, just given the size of transactions, there is a cost to liquidity as well. If I'm making, Raju, take a simple example. Let's say your company needs to pay Deepak's company, okay, $100 million. And you need to make that payment at, make it up, 3 in the morning tonight.
Tonight, right?
Right? 3 in the morning. You're based in country A, Deepak is based in country B, right? You're tapping into someone's liquidity of $100 million, right? There is both an opportunity cost for the provider of that liquidity, right? And there is a cost to that liquidity. So you're availing a service that actually, see, we're assuming if I'm transferring $1 to you, there's no cost, it's cheap, it's free, it's instant, it's domestic, and whatever. But you're making a payment through complex rails with a lot of guardrails that are put into place to do validation, sanctions, compliance, AML checks, etc. And offering you $100 million liquidity to support that payment in real time outside of banking hours, right? So now there is cost, and what is the value to you, Raju? Right? Because if you make that payment to him, your business can get going. Or you can say, don't need the payment today. I can wait 3 days or whatever the natural turnaround time is. Then maybe the cost is slightly lower.
Okay.
And that's what I mean. We need to understand the cost and appreciate the value. And once you do that, you see what you're paying for.
Yeah. Deven, you are saying that the merchants or let's say businessmen or whatever the payment makers are paying for value, not for that, just for transferring the money, right? You are just saying that we are getting the value.
Yeah, Raju, so don't forget the underlying part. There is a cost to the transaction. And there is the value. Because now if you break it up and ask me the question differently, let's say you and I don't know each other. I'm buying something from you, right? You don't want to go through a very complex transaction of creating an escrow account, me putting money there, me taking the goods. It's a very simple transaction. I'm buying a cup of coffee from you. But if I swipe my card or if I tap my card on your terminal, right, you're not getting the money right now. You're getting an approval that I'm good for the money.
Good for money, yes, exactly.
Trust.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
That's what, on a card transaction, the terminal is not getting the money that day for you.
Exactly.
It's giving you an approved sign which tells you that I'm good for the, make it up here, let's say 300 rupee cup of coffee that I'm buying. that I'm good for it, but I'm walking away with the coffee. You've not got the money, but you've got a notification that tells you that it's coming.
It's coming. That is your money.
That's right.
Of thing, yeah.
But you don't know me. I've come from some random part of the world,
Yeah.
but you're still making the money. So you're willing to absorb some cost.
Yeah.
Rather than saying you will only sell to Deepak who you know, and you will do it at no cost.
No cost,
Right?
yeah.
So that's what I'm trying to bring in. What's the value? Your business expands by you being able to sell to a lot of people. You've got to appreciate the value of that element apart from the cost. You've got to appreciate, or you turn around and say, you know what, I don't care about Deven. I will only sell to Deepak. This target market is off, so you don't bear that cost. But doing more allows you to grow your business more.
Exactly.
There's a marginal cost to it, right? I mean, it's a marginal cost.
Very marginal, right?
Did I answer your? I hope I answered your question, Raghu.
Yeah.
Super.
And then, what do you see the role of cross-border digital payments to increase the financial inclusion to the peoples?
Raju, it's a great question. I think, but if you look at financial inclusion, it starts in the domestic market.
Yes.
I think what cross-border transactions do is it almost gives an exponential growth to the propensity of that financial inclusion. And what I mean by that, it doesn't. If you're not in the system, a cross-border transaction is not bringing you into the system necessarily. But once you're in the system, it allows you to disproportionately grow the amount of commerce or business that you do as a micro or an SME or whatever size of company or proprietorship that you run. It allows you to expand that.
Yeah.
Right? Because now the world is your oyster, right? I mean, your marketplace is very, very large and different.
Very large and different. Yeah. Deven, I just want to ask you all quite different questions.
Please.
That we are in Nepal, that we are growing in digital payment and everything. We are a developing country,
Yes.
right? And you are sitting on a world's best country. Best.
That's very, very, very kind. That's very kind. But okay.
It's so developed and everything is seamless there, right? So, what's your suggestions to our industrialists in doing in payment, who are in the payment ecosystem, to boost their country as a develop and to boost their economy, GDP? It contributes in GDP as well.
Look, it's a great question, and
this is just for the knowledge and then sharing to the industry.
Yeah, and Raju, if I may, I'm guessing you're asking me the question more from a payments perspective, right? Because I can't claim to talk about anything too much beyond that. But take this comment with whatever little knowledge I bring into the space. But I think in any country where RTP or real-time payments or instant payments or whatever they're called in different geographies, where that's picked up, it's given a lot of impetus to local merchants, right? We have seen in different countries, this has happened in different ways. Adoption is very important.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah.
I can build the fanciest of rails and make them available. But Raju, if it costs you, for example, for a 100 rupee transaction, if someone says, Raju, it's going to cost you 10 rupees to make the transaction, you're going to say, why am I going to do it?
Exactly.
Right? But if it is free or near free to you or to the recipient, right?
Yeah.
It suddenly the adoption can really take up. I'm a firm believer on kind of customer experience. Okay?
Yes.
And I think every country that comes live on a new system must take learnings from other countries so that journey can be a lot shorter and faster.
Exactly.
Right? If a particular country went first, they would have learnt a lot through all the teething problems. We only see the end state and it looks great, but there would have been a lot of learnings. Right? In certain countries, you had another acronym for RTP, which is request to pay.
Yeah.
Right? Which is if I want money from you, I can initiate and request a payment from you rather than you only pushing money.
Okay.
In some countries, that has worked. QR-based solutions have been great in many, many, many parts of the world, right? Because it makes accessibility a lot easier.
Yeah.
Then the question is, how do these QR payments work? Is it very easy for me to pull out my bank app and to scan it? But what if it's on a website? Do I have to save the photo? What is that journey like? How easy is it?
Yeah.
See, QR sounds great, and it actually is.
Yeah.
But if it's on a website and I'm on my device,
Yes, right.
how do I get into my banking app? Do I have to save the photo, then open banking app, upload the photo? If it's too many hops, I'm going to be like, it's not working for me. Maybe I'll just go card the transaction.
Exactly.
Right? And so those things are very important. A rail is a rail, but how you put the wrappers around it, how seamless do you make it, how easy do you make it? What if my transaction, to your earlier example, what if something didn't happen the way it was supposed to? What is the dispute process, the refund process?
Yeah.
Those journeys are very important. So I always advise, if you're building something, you've got to look at not only the good outcome, you've got to look at all the scenarios of outcomes that could play out and make sure that they're thought through.
Yeah.
Right? See, a lot of countries went live on RTP when API was not even prevalent. Now it's a different world we live in. You can have an API, connectivities and wrappers for a lot of things that can go around a payment. So the customer experience can be very seamless.
Very seamless.
Then adoption is high.
That adoption has to be high to grow the merchants and to the business.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah, it's been a long time. And then can you be part of cross-border payments? I want to just want to listen your experience, your knowledge to the youth bankers or tech savvy guys who want to coming to this industry. How you find it? What is your experience? Can you please brief me on that? Quite your banking journey, how it is started.
Like my journey?
Yeah.
Sure. So look, I've been in banking for 22 years.
Yeah.
I started my career in New York. I studied in the US. I started my journey there.
Yeah.
If you rewind life 22 years back, right? There was a lot of commerce which was even now today. By the way, the US dollar is a currency of trade even now. But a lot of things were happening in the US. Then many years back, I decided I wanted to make my way back to Asia. After having spent some time in parts of Europe before wanting to come to Asia. And after coming here and seeing the advent of things changing and evolving in Asia, I spent a lot of time in this part of the world. And by the way, I now do a global role sitting out of Asia for the very simple fact that this has become now the cradle of innovation, right?
Yeah.
I mean, you think about whether it's the subcontinent here where we are right now, whether it's the Southeast Asian countries, there's so much of or China, Hong Kong, and that Taiwan and that part of the world, Korea, Japan. There's so much happening in this part of the world that it's exciting that even as a US bank, we've kept some of our global roles out of this part of the world to ensure that we play in the ecosystem, we understand the ecosystem, we're active participants and making changes from here which we're taking into the rest of the world. So there's a lot of stuff that we do in this part of the world that we take into the network as well. Okay. So it's a little bit of a paradigm shift for us in how we operate. But look, a lot of my career has been focused around payments as it pertains to cards or domestic cross-border payments, etc. That's been kind of my focus area, and it's fascinating to see how much of the world is now focused into the world of payments. It wasn't so 15, 20 years back. It was very much a back office thing, but now with how commerce is happening, right? Yes. Consumers are buying directly, B2B has kind of become a game changer. Payments have become a forefront decision-making process in business owners today.
Okay. So, as you said, it's fascinating. And
yes.
Then what's your suggestion to the young generation coming to this industry?
Look, I always believe that, in order to drive the future, you've got to understand a little bit of history. Now, you don't have to go spend years understanding the old systems, but when you do, you get a greater appreciation of where we've come from, because there's still a lot of legacy out there. But it's important because it helps you then figure out how do you move forward. Okay. We have to learn from the past, but we have to think forward. Having that foundation becomes very critical in the decision making that you make to move forward. I mean, you think about it, right? The card rails were set up 50, 60, 70 years back, and look at the connectivity, the thought process, etc., that are in play over there, right? We're trying to build that through the payment networks now, right? And we're only talking about like bilaterals and some multilaterals right now, and it's complicated. Right? It's really complicated, but you can learn by looking at some of the things that were built, the thought process that went through when global networks were created, whether it's on the payment side, whether it's on the card side, because it gives you a great understanding of when you're looking at building something for the future, what are the things you need to consider as you move forward. Yes, then you can learn and improve, but it gives you a great foundational understanding.
Exactly. And then Deven, we are almost to the end of our conversations. It's a really wonderful conversation with you in first meeting. And
Thank you.
It's very privileged to give me a time that.
Pleasure is all mine, Raju. Pleasure is all mine. Thank you.
Want to say something that is I am not asked you, that is you want to speak to the audience. Is there anything you want to?
Look, I mean, and maybe it's more encouragement to the youth. The world of payments is fascinating. Please, whether you look at a bank, you look at a fintech, but it's a great place to enter. Like I always tell people that, like I said, many years back, this was not in the forefront. It now is. Come, be a part of it. Be a part of the change that you can drive as you look at the future.
Thank you. Wonderful conversation,
thank you.
Deven.
The pleasure has been all mine. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.